Hi everybody, welcome to week 6, and we're going to take a little bit of a diversion this week, which I'm going to get into in just a minute. I'm also going to take some time to have you view some videos with a little bit different way of looking at strategic planning. So let me take just a few minutes to explain what I want us to do this week. This lecture should be shorter than normal, so please do view it because it's going to have some instructions for you for this week. So let's move right into that. So first of all, let me reiterate where we're at right now in week 6 of the course. We're really more than a third of the way through the course. And so where are we at? Well, here's what we've done so far in the course in terms of talking about strategic planning. We've talked about mandates. Those were those things called the must-dos of an organization. So every organization has things that it is required to do, and some of those requirements are derived from things like laws or ordinances or contracts that the organization is engaged in. In other words, written requirements. Some of the mandates are informal, and they're expectations from people like the client population that the organization might serve. Or, if we're talking about in terms of a government, it might be the citizens who have particular expectations that sometimes aren't written down. It may be funders in your nonprofit, people who are responsible for really endowing your organization, and they may have expectations. And then we talked about stakeholders, and of course we realized and we discussed that stakeholders and mandates really are hand in hand with each other, aren't they? Because often the stakeholders are the people who are expressing mandates. Well, the stakeholders are people or groups or organizations that have a claim on our organization. And so sometimes their claims become a mandate for our organization to accomplish, right? We talked about that. So then we talked about the environment, the internal and the external environment, and how these affect the organization. And you recall we did this through the device of doing this SWOT or SWOT analysis, where we talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, which some people call threats. And then last week we looked at strategic issues, and I had you look at a local nonprofit in Omaha and come up with some of the issues that are strategic issues in the organization. And I also had you look at your own organizations that you're doing for your term project and try to define strategic issues for your organization. So next week what we're going to do is we're going to get back on that same track, and we're going to design a mission statement for a local nonprofit organization. So as I said at the outset, this week is a bit of a practical diversion, and I have a reason for doing that. And that is that I want to use the knowledge that all of you have gained up to this point to design interview questions that you are going to use with your term project to interview the key member of your organization that is going to be the basis of your term project. And the second thing that we're going to accomplish this week is that you're going to review your interview questions with each other, and my expectation is that you're going to offer some advice and practical advice and critiques and questions on each other's interview questions. So that's what we're up to this week, and that's the reason for this diversion. All right, I said I was going to do two things, and the one thing I was going to do was introduce you to a different way of looking at strategic planning away from the Bryson text. And in fact, this will be kind of the first time we do this. Later in the course, I'm going to introduce you to a couple more concepts that are not necessarily in the Bryson text either. But this week, I'm going to talk about Jen Lachman and what she thinks about strategic planning. Okay, so Jen Lachman, I have included all 4 of her short videos on the Blackboard site. What I'd like you to do this week is look at all 4 videos. They're really not very long at all. She has a YouTube channel, and Jen Lachman has a consulting firm. By the way, I don't really know Jen Lachman personally. I just, over the course of time, I discovered her views on strategic planning, and I think they're really interesting, and some of you might find them useful. So look at all 4 videos, but next week we're going to come back to 1 and 2. For this week, I want you to pay attention to 3 and 4. And I want you to compare the sources of, I say compare the 2 sources. What I mean by that is compare Bryson and Jen Lachman. And what Jen Lachman views, it's particularly interesting, her views on SWOTs. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So that's part 1 of what I want you to do this week. View what Jen Lachman has to say, and we're going to come back to her. The second thing I want to do is at the Assignments tab, go to Assignment A3, and you know that is due on October 8th. So what Assignment A3 is what I call your term project interview plan, where you are going to turn into me formally your interview questions for my evaluation. These are the questions that I want you to use in your interview. Now, on the Assignments tab, I've attached several helpful sources, and these include a document from the Purdue OWL. Remember, I've recommended to all of you that you use the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, or the Purdue OWL, as a great source for writing. And here's a good example of that. There's a document that I attach on what are primary sources. And then I also attach a document from the Purdue OWL on conducting interviews. So the Purdue OWL, there's a PowerPoint that talks about how to conduct an interview. And then the other thing that I give you on the Assignments tab, it's not from Purdue OWL, I got this from YouTube. It's 2 really kind of entertaining videos on how to conduct an interview, where you see 2 students demonstrating how a poor interview would go and how a much better interview would go. So all those things I provide to you in the spirit of helping you conduct a successful interview. Because I do know that interviewing someone might be daunting for some of you. But the fact of the matter is, most of you have interviewed for jobs. I've interviewed for jobs. I've interviewed people for jobs. And I can tell you that interviewing someone else sometimes is actually is just as nerve-wracking as being interviewed. So I do understand that it might be a daunting task, but it's really also a useful task for you to pick up, and that's why I do it. So this week our discussion board assignment is for you to provide these interview questions to the group. Okay, so let's think through some of these sources I'm having you look at. I said key on Jen Lachman's discussions in video 3 and video 4, but watch all 4 of them. We're going to come back to 1 and 2. Think about, as you view Jen Lachman in video number 3 of hers, think about how she relates to this issue we've already studied of mandates. Think about how she relates to understanding the environment by conducting a SWOT, and think about what Jen actually says about SWOTs. And then think about understanding stakeholders and how she approaches that. And then in her video number 4, she actually starts talking about goals. And this is something we will key on. After we talk about all these foundational things, what kind of goals do we set? So Jen has a video where she talks about setting SMART goals. So think about what Jen Lachman says in setting SMART goals. And then I want you to think about your term project organization, the organization that you're using as the subject matter for your term project. And at this point, really at this point in the course, you ought to be able to start thinking about that organization in terms of everything you've learned about strategic planning up to this point. And what the interview is going to do for you is it's going to give you a really great database of information about that organization that's going to help you start filling in the gaps on your term project in terms of thinking about strategy and your organization. Okay, so what's this thing about conducting an interview? Let me give you some of my own practical tips, having done some interview research myself. I do know it's daunting, but here's a few practical steps. And again, I give you all these sources so that you can think through these things yourself, and you're not just taking this from me, you're taking it from a lot of sources. First, here's what you gather from an interview. And here's how I want you to think of an interview. An interview is data. An interview is data just as much as some spreadsheet full of numbers is data. It is useful point-in-time information about an organization that you can use to make inferences and draw conclusions. So you have to design your interview to gain that useful data, to gain useful research. What is it you want to know about the organization in terms of creating this term project? What are really the vital things that you need to know from that key person to create this term project? So that's the first part. You design your interview to gain useful research because it is data. The second thing is, because it's data, you're actually going to analyze this data when you're done. So this means that you don't just, when you write your paper isn't going to be a rehash of the interview. I don't want the transcript of your interview word for word and put a cover page on that and call it your term paper. It's one source of data. So you're going to combine this source of data with other things you find out about the information, from things like the website, from things like looking for press clippings, from things like understanding the environment in which the organization operates. This is one source of data, but this source of data, you're going to look for things like trends, patterns, causes, and effects, and you're going to be able to pick those up from the interview. So again, an interview is data. Second, an interview is also a very practical exercise. Those YouTube videos will kind of allude to that. It's a practical exercise, and it can be successful or unsuccessful, and you need to work to make it successful. So here's ways to do that. The first thing is be prepared. You do not want to waste the time of someone in an organization. By this time, you've contacted someone in the organization and set up the interview. Please don't waste their time. You can engage in some introductory discussion, and you should do that. But please recognize that they have a schedule to meet. Have your questions written in advance. That, in fact, is what this week is about, helping you get these questions written in advance. That's why I do a term project interview plan. Third thing is plan for around 30 minutes. That would be the maximum amount of time I'd plan for. In fact, when you contact them, you should be telling them, I want to interview you for about 30 minutes. Now, really, sometimes a respondent will talk with you for a couple of hours. I've had that happen. Sometimes they'll talk to you for 11 minutes. So I did one project where I interviewed 7 different people with the same set of questions. The longest interview was, I think, 45 minutes, and the shortest interview was 11 minutes. And I asked the same exact questions of every single respondent, but plan around 30 minutes. The next thing is, this is just really should be common sense. Set the appointment and keep the appointment. It's just like if you have a job interview and they say come in at 9:30 on Monday morning, don't get there at 9:45 Monday morning. Get there at between 9:20 and 9:25. Set an appointment and keep the appointment. Have a notebook and writing instruments. And the last thing is, recording is very useful, but you have to ask permission. So please don't ever record anybody in a stealth way. Don't have a recorder stuck in your backpack or your pocket or something like that, where you're recording them secretly. Always ask, may I record this interview? Most of the time, people are going to say it's fine. So those are some practical tips on doing an interview. Okay, so here we are on the discussion board assignment for this week. And again, this is a practical diversion. But using all the resources we've used to date. So that includes Jen Lachman's videos number 3 and 4, which I'm asking you to look at this week, the readings we have from the Bryson text so far, all the exercises we've conducted so far, including the short analysis paper that you've written thus far, the Purdue OWL PowerPoint, and in fact the YouTube videos that I've given you to look at too. I want you to develop a set of 5 interview questions. It actually can be more than 5. I'd like a minimum of 5. But I will tell you, if you have 10 interview questions, you're going to have a hard time getting 10 interview questions in 30 minutes. So develop a set of 5 interview questions. And then on the discussion board, here's what I want you to include. And I want people to come back and critique your work. So tell us all the name of the organization, the role of the person you're interviewing. You may or may not use their name. This is classroom work. You know, it's not going any further than the classroom, so you don't have to give us their name. The project option you're using from your proposal, you know, which of the options from the syllabus are you using, and the 5 interview questions. And then after each interview question, I want you to write a statement about how asking this question is going to help you gain information for the term project. This goes back to thinking of an interview as data gathering. How is this going to gather data for you? So that's part 1 of the discussion board. Part 2 is when you comment back to your classmates, I want you to offer suggestions for improvement. And actually, you might learn some things about your own interview questions from reading the questions of others. So I want you to offer suggestions for improvement, or if there's something you don't understand about their interview questions, then please ask. Now this is all in the hope of improving your assignment. So I started to say that. What's the goal of all this? So first of all, interviews provide you with data, and so it needs to be useful. So the second thing is everything we're doing this week on the discussion board is going to help you complete assignment A3, which is due on October 8th, which isn't this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after. So really, this assignment is very timely. You put your discussion questions out there as classmates. You evaluate and critique each other. That gives you an opportunity to refine those questions so that when you turn them into me in assignment A3, you'll have the benefit of the input from your classmates, and you'll have the benefit of improving them. So that's everything we're doing this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing your interview questions. And as always, please do contact me if you have concerns or questions. Thank you very much.